Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next one comes from Bahim Hamasharef. I hope I've got your name right. You guys know I'm the world's worst speller of names and pronouncer of names. Anyway, Bahim, I'm going to say it's Bahim, writes, the hardware architecture of these rolling units can be studied from their respective schematics, i.e. SynthXL website. Their OS from dump at SynthROM website, reverse engineer task and include the floppy disk routines, especially the FAT system where they use, if lucky, maybe just file names or extensions sometimes, perhaps at the floppy format level with a number of sectors and tracks. As for the patches and files, structured data, I remember some Roland paper documentation I brought decades ago on the format of the S60 760 CD, sampler CD-ROM. Maybe someone studied the Roland floppy disk low-level formatting and files and data structures, often similar to the MIDI system exclusive messages format. I guess these units would benefit from a floppy to SD unit replacement or some retrofit faster serial port. That was an intense piece of text actually. And this was in response to how to convert the Roland S550 format to work on a Roland S50. A video I did in January 2021. Now the interesting thing is that many people know that the Roland S550 and S50 were deemed to be the same units, when in fact they use the same sampling architecture. But in terms of the units themselves, the S550 was far more flexible unit. And the classic thing is that you can't put a disk straight from an S550 into an S50, and likewise you can't put an S50 disk straight into a 550 without actually doing some sort of conversion utility, running it through a conversion utility. Anyway, in response to this, Bahim, I said, thanks for the insight into these samplers. It's always interesting to hear other people's views. Roland, unusually for this point in time, used a format that was readable on a 720 800 KB disk, which a Windows machine could read. It was one of the few, actually. Many of the manufacturers around this time had their proprietary formats, but the manufacturers started to sort of collate around a 720 800 kilobyte format that could be read by a Windows machine. And that was really interesting, but up until this point they're all over the damn shop. And I've got to be honest and say I'm still head scratching myself around the Yamaha TX16W, because it's driving me potty, that one, and I just kind of put it to one side while I was working on something else. I will go back to it and spend a few head scratchy days trying to get my head around why I can't make it do certain things. But other manufacturers, Yamaha and Sonic, were still using proprietary formats at this point. At that point, I would like to pick up a misconception that an SD card reader that many use to replace the floppy disk loads information quicker than the floppy. The reality is it's not the speed of the hard drive that is the issue. It's the speed that the machine can buffer the data into the synth memory. You can have the fastest device going, but if the synth can only read it in at a certain rate, that's the rate it reads it in at. And yes, while you do get a slight improvement on the SD cards, potentially through the fact that you lack the mechanical part of the floppy drive having to locate the area on the disk where the data is stored, but you are normally talking, a second at most for that. The data transmittal from the device to the synth is probably still going to be your bottleneck in the way these things operate. So, don't think that buying an SD card is going to save your life. And in actual fact, quite a few people have commented that they've bought SD card readers, installed them in their machines, and then they get quite a high percentage dropout rate if the SD card reader is not an expensive SD card reader. And what do I mean by that? So the SD card reader effectively is reading the data off a card, and then it's throwing the data at the buffer. And if the buffer can't handle the data, it drops it. So you've got to remember, these machines were written before a lot of, should we say, hardware encoding and throttling was put in. They were written, a lot of these machines were built on shoestrings. So a lot of this fancy circuitry that protected you from doing stuff wasn't incorporated because it wasn't seen as necessary. Anyway, I've also got a pet peeve with these devices, and my pet peeve is what I just basically said, is you've got to buy the expensive one, you can't buy the cheap one. The cheap one is basically being sold by anybody who can get an eBay account and can shop on Alibaba. But the more expensive ones are the ones that are more likely to be tuned to work with your device. Now, what do I mean by that? So the cheap ones, number one, you've just got a 2-digit numeric code and you have no idea what's in the folder. Whereas the more expensive ones have an LCD or an LED display that will actually tell you the name of the folder and potentially the names of the files, depending on what version you buy. But on the flip side, in terms of the circuitry of the cheaper ones is literally just made to spew a file's contents through to the synthesizer with no throttling and no inspection and no error correction. And if the synthesizer rejects it, it just rejects it, bang, gone. And you probably sit there scratching your head going, why isn't this loading? So that's kind of my peeve with these devices. Yes, I have got devices like this. I still prefer to use floppy disk, if I'm brutally honest, but there was one or two devices where I had no choice because I couldn't get floppy disk replacements. So there you go. A very interesting insight into the mindset and where you get information from relating to these old samplers.